Hallelujah. Amen.
Praise the Lord. Can I get a chair here?
Oh, I forgot.
I forgot it. That's all right. Praise the Lord. I think I said this last time. I was so nervous today. I think more so the last time because I didn't really have a point to all the research that I did until about 7 o'clock tonight. And so, yeah. There's a couple of things that I'm missing in my PowerPoint presentation that I usually put up because God said He was going to give me the word at the last minute here. And y'all pray for Brother Russell because I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Thank you, Jesus. Praise the Lord. I got this book, this new book called Reviving Evangelism. I will reference it tonight a couple of times, but I kind of want to give you a little bit of a background as to where my mind went. Tonight's Bible study is going to be more closely aligned to a historical lecture. For reasons that really start with my generation. When you use the word millennials in a business setting, it's a bad word. In a spiritual setting, it's a bad word. Millennials seem to be the generation that nobody loves too much. We are always doing something wrong, right? The millennial generation. So much so that me and Minister Russell had a conversation that we don't really feel like we're millennials. Like our birthdays fall into the dates, but we don't really feel like we belong in that category. Yeah, there's an exception, right? There's always an exception. Praise the Lord. So that I think that began kind of my study on where the millennials are at spiritually. And almost a defense of my generation. And so it started with the book Exodus, chapter 20, starting at verse 18. And the word of the Lord reads, and all the people saw the thunderings, and just in case you didn't know where we were at in the historical storytelling of this scripture, the children of Israel have been delivered out of the hand of Egypt, and they have gathered together on Mount Sinai, at the bottom of Mount Sinai, and the Spirit of the Lord comes over that mountain, and He shows Himself, if you will, through thunderings and lightnings and noise to the children of Israel. So, and all the people saw the thunderings and the lightning and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. So they backed up, like, what was going on? And 19 says, and they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear it, but let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said unto the people, fear not, for God has come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you sin not. And the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said unto Moses, thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, ye have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. Ye shall not make with thee gods of silver, neither shall ye make unto you gods of gold. And so I found this particular scripture to be very telling of who God was to the children of Israel. They did not believe that they were God's chosen people. What they believed is that Moses was sent to deliver them. And it was through the relationship that Moses had that their deliverance came. And the reason why I can say that they believe this, and this is one of the things that I was not able to get up. If you move over with me to Exodus chapter 32. And I apologize for not having it up on the screen. But that's what we got our Bibles for, right? Got our Bibles with us. Jump on over to Exodus chapter 32. Starting at that first verse, and it said, when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, up, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we want not what is become of him. The children of Israel said, make somebody to go before us. Make an intermediary, that's the word, maybe. Make a representative that can lead us, because we have no direct connection to God. Moses was our only connection to God. I don't know what happened to us, so make us somebody who can get us to God. And God dropped in my spirit, this is today's church. This is why when the preacher says something that you don't necessarily agree with, you feel comfortable in your heart not coming to church for a year. This is why when one of the greeters at the door of the church gives you a side eye and an attitude, you're comfortable enough to say, oh, I'm leaving that church. Ain't no God in that church. Because your connection to God is tied to a man or a building instead of being directly tied to God. You don't feel like you're a chosen one of God, because if you felt like you were a chosen one of God, you would trust the path that he's taking you on. Irregardless of what the preacher has said that you didn't necessarily like, you would trust, as long as they're a Bible preaching each preacher, you would trust God's path. And so I said, well, there you go, right? That's the message. That's it. We don't trust God. We don't have any kind of connection to God. But I think a misconception that comes forth, and as I was reading this book, Reviving Evangelism, it said the trajectory of the church and the path that it's going on is so much so that not only are we losing members at a rapid pace, but we're choosing to think and we're choosing to decide not to bring more members in. If you are attending a church that you're not comfortable inviting somebody else to, I think maybe you need to figure out where you're supposed to be. Because God gave us one very specific commission, and that was to go out and preach the gospel, right? And if we're not able to do that based on some things that we feel like is happening within your church, you don't have a direct connection to God. Because if God gave you a mission, he is going to follow through. He is going to finish the work that he began in you. Amen? So I feel like another misconception is that somehow Generation X is the generation prior to the millennials. And then, I forget the name of the one right before that. There's baby boomers and there's one right before that. Somehow we believe that Generation X birthed nothing but atheists. Somehow you guys just birthed a bunch of people who don't want to follow Jesus. There was nothing that happened in between your generation and where we're at. We all just are heathens and we don't want to follow the Lord. I feel like that's kind of the overall feeling I get from the elders spiritually. They're like, this generation has no concept of who God is and has no desire to know who God is. And it just began with the millennials. Well, I'm going to take you guys back a little bit. 1757. This gentleman's name is William Blake. William Blake was most famous for a book he wrote called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. William Blake's earliest works that he wrote was primarily about a rebellious character in protest against dogmatic religion, or religion by works, if you will. he shared the belief that the fall of man, Adam and Eve, was not the result of man's incompetence, but rather an incompetent creator. He most notably refused to view the crucifixion as the death of Jesus, but rather the death of God. The reason why he's up here is he is one of the originators of the phrase, God is dead. And I'm going to just read directly from some people much smarter than me wrote this. And what he basically said is he announced that all deities actually reside in the human breast. Therefore, it emphasizes the belief that any theory of the divine must first originate from man itself. If you know anything about Greek mythology, it's very similar to some of the beliefs that as long as the deities or the gods in Greek mythology had a following, they were able to exist. Without their following, if people began to not believe in that God, they would cease to exist. That's really what the idea William Link had. And he said that God, his most famous statement is, God is Jesus. Now, on the surface, that's like, okay, yeah, God is Jesus, Jesus is God. We kind of switch those back and forth. But what he meant by that is he meant that the man Jesus took the place of God. Which means God ceased to exist as Elohim, as the Yahweh, as El Shaddai, as the all-knowing being. He ceased to exist as that, but he became Jesus. And then when he died as on the crucifixion, God, that Old Testament God, if you will, died on the cross and did not come back. And so he said the birth of consciousness represented an apparently irremediable breach between man and nature. In order to ease this sense of isolation, man has evolved a moral order to stimulate a secondary unity. Because he is now less than man, he will try to become more than man. So man created the idea of God because there was a separation, an isolation between a man's natural purpose. That is what that means. A man just is alive, and because he is isolated by himself, he comes into the world by himself, he dies by himself, he created kind of a moral deity so that he would have some kind of purpose. This was William Lake's teachings. All right? And then he finally said that Christ is God for Blake because he has had the imagination power to see the thou is nothing other than all of humanity, while the crucifixion is the ultimate, truly imaginative abnegation of self. Not because it arose from a corresponding abnegation, in mankind, but because it posits, by example, the eventual mutuality so great as to negate all the selfhood. So that's just a whole bunch of words to say that we also created the idea of a crucifixion to kill off the nature of God that really was no longer necessary in our minds because we were awoken, we have awareness, right? So that's William Blake. 1757. There was no millennials alive in 1757. Okay? Friedrich Nietzsche is how you say that last name. Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche said, he was actually noted, he was most noted by being described as the intellectual heir of William Blake. So he took the idea that William Blake had and intellectualized it, or used a bunch of more big, very large words and made some really big concepts that people said, wow, you're so smart, right? So Friedrich Nietzsche describes, he wrote a play, and the name of it is escaping me, I don't have it on here, I apologize. But he wrote a play, and he was most notable for this book of songs and rhymes, The Gay Science. The book's title, actually, he was a German, it was written in German, and the translation originally was the joyful wisdom. So that word in this particular concept is the happy science, the joy in being awoken, if you will, or enlightened. And he wrote, God is dead, God remains dead, we have killed him. There has never been a greater deed, and whosoever shall be born after us, for the sake of this deed, he shall be part of a higher history than all history hereto. And essentially, without going into a ton of information about him, he wrote a ton of works. He did a lot of research. And what he said is that the birth of science, or the further understanding of science, made it so that we actually are no longer in need of God. He was very similar to William Blake in that he said that the individual, we ourselves, actually have the same amount of power as Jesus. We ourselves have the ability to take on that deity. It is within ourselves that all things start. He was an atheist for all of his adult life, and he didn't actually mean that God died. He really meant that God never really existed in the way that we believe. The idea of the universe that was governed by physical laws and not divine providence is what really was the author of this idea in his mind. There are actually physical laws that we can begin to, the law of relativity, we can begin to understand gravity. There are physical laws that explain every single thing that is happening in this world. So we no longer are ignorant children who are in need of a God. It's similar to the need for a Santa ticket. That's what he akin God to, if I were to use an example. And once you get older and you really truly understand how life works, you no longer need the magic of God because we are so smart. We no longer need to be organized around the idea of a divine right to be legitimate, but rather we are constant in the rationality of our understanding. That was Friedrich Nietzsche. He was the father or the precursor, if you will, to the idea of existentialism, post-structuralism, and postmodernism. I put those up here because this really does talk about where the millennial generation is today. Existentialism is actually the philosophical theory or approach which emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent determining their own development through acts of will. So it is the idea, philosophically, they had never really approached this, but it's the idea that everything starts with you as an individual first. It does not start with God. It doesn't start with God knowing you in the womb. It starts with you as an individual. Existentialism means that when the decisions that I make, the path that I choose, really originated from me personally. Not that God directed me this way, but I am the reason. I am the master of my own universe. That's existentialism. Post-structuralism, I'm not going to read that because it's, again, a bunch of words that are completely unnecessary. But post-structuralism basically means it's your environment that structures how you view the world. It is my birth in Denver, Colorado, the households that I was raised in, the social and political environment that structured the person I am today. That's what post-structuralism is. And then finally, postmodernism. The biggest thing, I think the easiest way to describe that is why. Why is this? Why does this happen? It's really, postmodernism is the idea that you should be a skeptic of everything. You should not trust anyone's true intentions, but rather you should be suspicious and have a sensitivity to ideology. So if somebody comes to you with this big idea, you really need to ask why. So Nietzsche was the beginning of these different ideals, if you will. And the reason why that's important, I don't think that postmodernism is a bad thing. I I don't think being skeptical and asking why, because God says in all you're getting, get an understanding, right? What I think is that the separation between I want to understand versus the knowledge that I gain makes me more intelligent than anybody who wrote the Bible, than any preacher who came before me. I'm more intelligent than Jesus himself. In fact, there is a atheist, who cares about his name, but he had a video that was titled, "If Jesus would be an atheist today too." Jesus is smart enough to be an atheist too, is what it said, what the name of the video was. Because they believe truly that all the knowledge that they're receiving, all the theories and the science and all the digging up and all the technology, everything that we're receiving, makes it so that we don't actually even need God anymore. And this was important because right about he was a German philosopher is the word that I was looking for. He was a German philosopher. Right about World War I, he began to gain support in his community. He actually died before his works became really prominent, but he gained support in his community. And most notably, one of his biggest supporters, and I would say most infamous supporters, was Adolf Hitler. Nietzsche is what it is. Okay. It could be Nietzsche, Pastor Bill. And that 2 Corinthians 4:3 says, "But if the gospel be hid, it is hid to them they are lost." And all of our understanding that we're getting of the world that God created, let's start with that. And all of that understanding, we lost the gospel. In all of our scientific findings, we are burying the gospel under human intellect. So much so that what bursts out of that human intellect is one of the biggest followers, Adolf Hitler. Do we think that Adolf Hitler was a smart man? Do we think he was a sane man? No. I don't think any who we would quote unquote call normal person would say that Adolf Hitler was a smart or sane man. He was demonic, he was a serial killer, he was crazy, right? He was insane. And yet he was a prominent follower of the ideology that we, in all of our knowledge, are smarter than God. That's what the start of this was. This was the start. And I just would like to make note that there was no millennials alive during World War II. Okay? I want to make that note. I'm just clarifying. Right? 1960. Time magazine printed this. They did it on Passover Friday, I believe. April 8th, 1966, I'm sorry. And the article in there, "Is God Dead?" was argued by what they believed were the smartest philosophers of their time. Without going into a ton of information, here's a list of them. The New Gospel of Christian Atheism, The Death of God, The Human Face of God, all of them really regurgitated, if you will, the writings of Nietzsche. They basically, in a lot of words, that's what happens with philosophers, is they use a lot of words to describe an idea, and the idea is that we no longer need God. The idea was that without all of your fussy philosophy and without all of your fussy spirituality, we can actually give birth to a new movement. And in fact, I actually want to go back really quickly. Nietzsche said this of his findings of God being dead. He said, "When one gives up Christian faith, one pulls the right to Christian morality out from from under one's feet. The morality is by no means self-evident. Christianity is a system, a whole view of things thought out together. By breaking one main concept out of it, the faith in God, one breaks the whole. So he was very clear what he was doing. He's saying by taking out the concept of an eternal God, by taking out the necessity from God, the moral standards by which Christianity bases all of their do's and don'ts falls apart. And he wasn't necessarily saying that was a good thing, but what he said is that it should excite the philosophers because it frees us to have illumination in this new dawn. So what he's saying is that the ideas of Christianity and the morality wasn't necessarily a bad thing. But our need for it is no more, because now, with that theory, quote unquote, falling apart, now we are able to figure out a new era, a new time in which we can develop our own moral standards. And that's why bringing Adolf Hitler into it, he developed, in his mind, he developed his own moral standards. He decided that based on Darwin's theory, the survival of the fittest, that the weak Jews were what was killing the world. And so if we were to take out morality and we were to take out God, we could examine that view and say, if it was truly true that the Jews were actually what was making this world weak, then yeah, it does make sense that we would kill them all. Because when we take out God and we take out the morality of God, we take out an understanding of everything. Because he is the one and only thing in this entire world that understands everything. Right? And so we go into the 1960s, and they are saying the same thing. This is the dawn of a new era. We don't need your 10 Commandments. We don't need your Jesus. We don't need your right and wrong, your uncircumcised, circumcised. We don't need that. We are in a new position in our life that what you did was good groundwork, but it fell apart because God is dead. And so what we will do is we will rewrite that, and we will become gods unto ourselves. That was the biggest idea that they had, is that each individual person is a god unto themselves. So you are the master of your universe. You are able to decide what's right and wrong, because we are all smart enough to decide what's right and wrong, right? The problem is, that's like telling your 3-year-old, you are now smart enough to decide what is right to put in your body and what is wrong to put in your body. How many vegetables is your 3-year-old going to put into their body? How many slices of cake is your 3-year-old? Because we are 3-year-old, we're beyond that. We're newborns when it comes to trying to compare us to the intelligence of God. And yet we've told ourselves, in all of our understanding of this world, I know exactly what it is I'm talking about. So out of this time period emerged, this is just 4 of the very many names that I could put up there. Out of the same time period emerged Charles Manson, Jim Jones, David Koresh, and Marshall Applewhite. Manson created the cult that he referred to as the Manson family. If you do some research on that, if you do some research on each individual person, I won't spend a ton of time on it because I feel like we spent a lot of time on the devil's work, right? But I'll say this: Charles Manson, Jim Jones, David Koresh, and Marshall Applewhite all have the same common denominator. They made themselves the savior. Charles Manson said that there is a war coming, and what we're going to do is we're going to do these 9 killings. And what these killings are going to do is they're going to jumpstart the war. And once this war starts, there is going to be an eternal lake under the desert that's going to open up to the true followers. And he had all these people convinced that that was what was going to happen. And so Charles Manson believed in his mind that he knew morally what he should be doing, right? Jim Jones was the author of the largest United States citizen massacre before 9/11. He convinced through the Bible, through reading the Bible incorrectly, and this is why God said, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." If you don't know God's word, it's very easy for Satan to take the scripture out and tell you, "See what it says here?" Right. And direct you where he wants you to go. Right. It is not enough for you to look at Moses going into the mountain. It is not enough for you to look at your preacher to preach to you every Sunday. It's not enough. I find things I've read these same passages that I read today, I've read them at least 100 times. It is the start that I always start when I'm starting the Bible over in Genesis. That's it, right? This is what we start over. I've read it so many times, and God reveals himself anew every time, because Jim Jones was able to take very specific scriptures, bring a congregation of people out to get Guana, I believe, and have them all 900 of his followers, commit suicide. Not only that, he put cyanide in grape juice. Not only that, but he had mothers and fathers giving it to their children. The biggest instinct, I would say, that sprang up out of me when I gave birth to Malachi was my protective instinct. There's a lot of things that I'll let slide unless it involves my baby, right? So where does your mind have to be that you think this word says something to the effect that you're allowed to give your child poison that you know will kill them? How do we get there? It's because we think we're so enlightened. We think we're so smart. We think we know what's going on. I'm not going to say it again. I'm just going to go. Today, millennials, okay, they weren't around then. But I would like to say that the current state of affairs with millennials started a long time ago. It started way before even 1780 or 1775, whatever that date was. Started in Genesis chapter 3. But today's millennials, 90% of Americans actually say they believe in God. A smaller portion of that quantify or clarify that they believe in the God of the Bible. Some of them just believe in a spiritual being. They believe in a God. There's something up there. We don't know what it is, but there's something up there. Which, if you read the works of C.S. Lewis, excellent apologist, that's where he starts. You got to believe that there's a God. Because if you don't believe that there's a God, everything else doesn't make sense. Everything else falls apart, right? So I think we're doing okay with the 90% of Americans. That's a large number believe in a God. But of those that believe in the biblical Bible God, an average of 96% of practicing Christians believe that you're supposed to be a witness of Jesus Christ. That's a big number. So they believe, as a part of my walk with the Lord, 96% believe that I should be sharing Jesus Christ. However, 47% of practicing Christians believe it is wrong to share one's faith with someone of a different faith in hopes that they will one day share the same faith. Let me read that to you again. They think it's wrong to share one's faith with someone of a different faith in hopes that they will one day share the same faith. One of the most popular phrases, I don't know if it's the next generation, but with our generation, is "you do you." Only God can judge me. You do you. We almost half of the practicing Christians think my evangelism is wrong if I am trying to convince you that the Lord Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. So it's not necessarily that they believe that they're own gods, but it is that they still believe that they're smarter. What they actually believe, and this was an excellent quote I found. This was a blog about millennial spirituality. Had nothing to do with Christianity, but millennial spirituality. And it says, our spirituality is different than the previous generations. It's more fluid and more individualized and more unique. It is not uncommon to go to a party, sit down, ask somebody what he or she believes, and find out that his or her philosophy is utterly specific to who he or she is. Now, I will say this. How you get to Jesus Christ is very unique to you. The message of Jesus Christ is not individualistic. It is the same message. Man is separated from God. He sends his son. He dies on the cross. He rises again in 3 days so that we have access to salvation. That message doesn't change. I don't care who you are. I don't care what country you came from. That message stays the same no matter who you are. Amen. So for the millennials to say, well, my spirituality is fluid. It looks different for me. That's why you can say in this generation, I can smoke weed and be the ambassador of weed, and I can put out a gospel album, because my spirituality is fluid. It can look a little different than your spirituality looks. So we're not saying that there's not a God. We're not saying that God's dead. But what we're saying is what you preached in this Bible doesn't exactly fit me. And so what's the result of that? Consistently for the last 40 years, up to 3 years ago, consistently, the life expectancy rose. The reasons could be various different things, but mostly it is the understanding of nutrition, the increase in health technology, so you can save somebody who gets sick more often than you used to, and diseases. We have better grasp and understanding of diseases. So the life expectancy for the last 40 years, up to 3 years ago, was on the rise. Makes a lot of sense, right? 3 years ago, the CDC, which is the Center for Disease and Control, showed that for the last 3 years, life expectancy has declined. 3 new reports from the CDC indicated that the average life expectancy in the United States has declined for the second time in 3 years. Deaths from drug overdose and suicide were responsible for much of that decline, with more than 70,000 drug overdoses deaths reported in 2017. As a result of the overall increases in mortality rates, average life expectancy decreased from 78.9 years to 78.6 years. What that means, how they determine the life expectancy in America, is they take for that year the age of every person that died in that year. They take the ages of all of them, they add them together, they divide it by the number of people, and that gives you an average year. So they have seen more deaths in younger people due to drug abuse and suicide, so much so that it affected the average life expectancy of the billions of people in the United States. That's a problem. That's why you cannot have a fluid spirituality, because you're missing a very critical link. That's why you can't say to yourself, the stuff in the Bible doesn't quite fit me. Because you're the children of Israel when God said, I gave you the land, who don't drive out the occupants of that land. And then a generation goes by that knows nothing about God. Read it in some Judges, the book of Judges. They were supposed to get rid of the things of that land because God already gave it to them, and they couldn't do it. And so the very following generation didn't know God. That's why, because you can't be fluid about this thing. It's very specific. The Word of God is very specific in what He requires of you. Like I said, this didn't really start in the 1700s. This didn't start with the millennial generation. This started with Eve. This is the very first start of the idea that we are smarter than God. In the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 1, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? He knew what God said. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest you die. Here is where I want to pause for just a second. God did not put the tree in the garden because he wanted them to feel like they were less. God didn't put the tree in the garden because he wanted them to feel like you have something that's going to make you mortal. God put the tree in the garden because he wanted them to trust what he said was true. And so the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, she didn't have to trust God to nourish her. And it was pleasant to the eyes. She didn't have to trust God to please her vision, right? And that the tree was desired to make one wise. She didn't have to trust the wisdom of God anymore. The 3 reasons that she ate from the tree are the 3 things that she told God by choosing that tree that she no longer needed him for. She took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew not they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Our own understanding simply can't bear the full reality of the world. We can't actually bear in our understanding the knowledge of good and evil. We weren't actually designed to bear that. And that's why God said that you were going to die, because with that knowledge came mortality, came separation from him. If you feel like you know what you're doing, the serpent said it, if you feel like you can be a God unto yourself, what do you need me for? Well, we know we need him for everything, right? We need God for the very breath in our body. And that's why when we begin to separate from him, we begin to die. Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 through 23. From that time forth began Jesus to show unto his disciples how that he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and the chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again on the 3rd day. And then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. But he turned and said to Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of man. What Peter did was the same thing that Eve did. What Peter did is he told Jesus Christ, who was laying out the very plan of our salvation, that I know better than you. No, Jesus, that's not going to happen to you. That's not right. Because my understanding of who you are, I understand that that can't happen to you. And that's why Jesus' response was so severe. Because he said, Satan, you don't get a say in how I present salvation to my people. You don't get to tell me you know better than me. Because what all of these people had in common, what Nietzsche had in common, and William Blake, and Adolf Hitler, and the God is Dead Time magazine, what they all had in common, and Peter and Eve, is the insanity of leaning on their own understanding. When you begin to lean on your own understanding, when you begin to think that the knowledge that I've gained has made me smarter than God, you begin the slippery slope to insanity. You begin to walk the path of losing your mind. Because the Lord says, trust in the Lord. The very Proverbs, who wrote Proverbs? Solomon. And what was Solomon known for? Wisdom. Being the wisest man ever. Said, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not unto your own understandings. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones. It is the very nutrition that keeps you going. Trust in the Lord. Without it, you are beginning the slope to insanity. You're going to lose your mind without trusting God. If you believe that your spirituality is fluid, you are believing that you're smarter than God. And it's going to drive you to drug abuse. It's going to drive you to suicide. Somebody needs to tell the millennials that if you trust in God with your whole heart, that's the only fluidity you need. I'm going to be fluid with whatever you need me to do, God, because where you lead me, I will follow. Somebody needs to tell the drug addict that what you're looking for in those drugs, you can only find when you begin to trust in the Lord. Somebody needs to tell those prisoners that what you are looking for when you are isolated in your cells. We got a letter actually from one of my cousins who is in prison, and he said a lot of the young men here are reaching out to Islamic faith for the wrong reasons. One of the driving factors for a young man to join the Nation of Islam is the works. They give you very specific works that you have to follow. And if you do just the right amount, you might get to heaven. Somebody needs to tell them that what they're looking for, that fulfillment, that purpose that they're looking for, can only be found when you first trust God. Somebody needs to tell this generation that what you're looking for on Instagram with them likes and them half-naked pictures, you're not going to find it there. You're going to find insanity there. But if you trust God, that's where you're going to find your fulfillment. Somebody needs to tell the church members that if the pastor said something that offended you, the only way that you're going to get reconciliation is if you begin to trust the Word of God, because maybe what he said was for you. Somebody has to tell this generation that if we don't trust God, you will lose your mind. It's in the numbers. The CDC ain't got nothing to do. The Center for Disease Control got nothing to do with the church. And they are recording the numbers. The suicides are going up. The drug abuse is going up because we are losing our minds because we don't trust God. It didn't start with William Blake. It started at the tree when Eve said, I know better than God. I don't need you anymore. The moment that you don't need God is the moment that you don't need your breath. That's what you can equate it to. Because you can find out all the answers in the universe. You can figure out that theory of relativity, you can figure it out, and you can be able to explain it, but can you figure out how to give yourself your next breath? Always. Can you figure out how to survive without food? You can figure out what food does to your body, right? But can you survive without it? One of the most profound men in Hinduism was Mahatma Gandhi. And he would go months without eating. He would just go without eating. But you know what he didn't do? He didn't go without drinking water. Because if you don't drink water, you die. So as smart as we got it all figured out. Ask somebody the next time, the atheist, can you figure out how your body can operate without water? Once you got that figured out, then you can start talking to me about who my God is. Can you figure out how to hold your cells together without the cross melanin? Can you figure that out? Because if you can figure out how to hold your cells together without that thing that God specifically designed, then you can laminin. Then you can talk to me about who God isn't. Then you can talk to me about why we no longer need God and how God is dead. If you can figure out how to hold yourselves together, otherwise you're going to lose your mind. And I said all that to say this. Minister Russell sent me an article that said by the year 2050, we will have lost over 300 million followers or believers in Jesus. Because we're in need of a revival. And the end of that article said, this information and this study doesn't disturb me, because I believe in a God that is a God of revival, and it has changed my mind, or it has changed my focus. And he said, what we need to be focusing on is building up God. And the same thing that reviving evangelism talks about. If we can't figure out how individually we can start inviting people into the good news of Jesus Christ, if we can't figure that out individually, because a large percentage of practicing Christians believe that evangelism is the work of the church, of their local church, and not them individually. That makes no sense. We are the church. Without us, this building doesn't exist. And so if we don't start to figure out how to stop the insanity from running rampant, how to stop the devil's lies and saying that we don't need God, if we don't figure that out, we're going to lose 30 million followers of Jesus Christ. That should disturb some people. We need to start getting to a place where we are disturbed when the devil wins a soul. We need to start getting to a place where when your coworkers ain't acting right because they don't know Jesus, that vesses us spiritually. So much so that we need to start sharing. You're losing your mind. You're not going to get very far if you tell somebody that they're losing their mind as just an opening statement. So I wouldn't recommend you go with that opening statement. But the idea is that you need Jesus Christ, because without him, there's a giant hole in your life that no alcohol, no relationship, no, there's an article that said CrossFit is now becoming the new religion. No exercise, there's a hole that none of that is going to be able to fill. Because without Jesus Christ, our very mind is gone. And that's all I have for y'all tonight. Amen? Good word. Questions, comments, concerns?